bit beyond the national rail plan and also talk about urban rail transport, whole mobility, sustainability, all those aspects as well, because we have good amount of time and hopefully cover that and lean on the expertise of the people out here and get their inputs. So in terms of the rail part of it and the transport part of it, if you were to look at it, there are two predominant domains which would be there. One is the road and the second is the rail. If we were to say from a movement perspective, either the passenger or the freight part of it, these are the principal modes of movement within the country. For the EXIM, obviously, there is rail, there is the seaport and all of that. But within the movement within the country, these are your primary modes of it. Over the last 8 to 10 years, I can say a decade, the investments which has happened in comparison to the road and the rail, and I'll draw the parallels as to why it is important to today's discussion. Road has got close to about 10 lakh crore, right? That's the kind of investment which has happened in the probably not even 10 years, about 7 years or so. In comparison to that, the rail part of it is only about 5.6 lakh crore. The growth in the overall freight part of it, if you were to look at it on the passenger one, has been at about 4.5%. The passengers being higher than the rail and then the freight part of it. But the track which has been put in the rail has been only having a CAGR growth of less than 0.5%. So when you have a demand which is far higher than the supply, there's bound to happen a congestion. And that's what has happened in the Indian railways. But this has been in a way set right in the last 3 years. Significant amount of investments has happened, and that could be a point of discussion. Now, where are these investments going? What is it planning to achieve? And the whole context of NRP is in that part of it. NRP is being the National Rail Plan part of it. And the modal shift which is expected to happen from the road to rail, and DFCCIL is expected to play a cornerstone in this particular shift. So just painting the picture in terms of what the context is and what are the points that we could deliberate upon. Now I would kind of invite Mr. Pathak to kind of set the context in terms of the overall the projects that could be being done, and in terms of the investment which is there. What are the initial low-hanging fruits that can be taken up? What are kind of innovations that could be done? New technology, all of that. Mr. Pathak, you want to give your opening remarks on this? Yeah. Mr. Pathak, we're not able to hear you.
You can't hear me even now?
Now we can.
Thank you for that. I will not talk as an L&T spokesperson because I'm here in my capacity as FICCI. But I must say that L&T is contributing in a large way to the dedicated freight corridor, as well as the high-speed rail project between Mumbai and Ahmedabad. And the kind of technology upgrades that I see, particularly for the DFC project, I'm sure Mr. Bhatnagar would talk more about that, and for the high-speed rail, is that we are launching girders of 60 tons at one go. And we have manufactured this at our factory in Kanchipuram. So these are the changes that are coming. But, going back to future of rail transport, I'd say that the National Rail Plan is a document that every one of us should read, anyone who's interested in the rail sector. And it's a very well put together document. The second thing I'd say that the past is no indicator of the future. So we are broadly where Japan was in 1964, when Japan had a terribly clogged rail network. And what they did was they took the passenger rail on a dedicated Shinkansen line. And this unclogged the freight lines, and efficiencies resulted on both counts. What we have done is we have gone in for dedicated freight corridors. And I'm sure that the Western Freight Corridor will be operational this year, apart from a last mile kind of connection. And the Eastern will be operational within the next few years. And suddenly this will unclog the passenger segment. And you will have much better service. You will have much more time efficiency. Rails will, the passenger trains will run on time. And efficiency all around will increase. With the Kavach, we know that railway safety is increasing. But I actually wanted to focus perhaps later on how rail-based transportation will change urban public transport. We are seeing metro systems coming up in so many cities, but there are potentially disruptive technologies which will mean that by 2030, we will not use any of these metro systems. So more on that later. Thank you.
Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Again, you are on mute.
Well, sorry. So I'm saying sorry, apologies. I was saying that thanks for giving that kind of a picture, moving in from the big picture of what the India can look at, and you drew upon the world part of it as well, Japan and what the experience there, and the micro as individual people got to experience. So I'll talk about talked about the whole investments. So if you see in the last 3 years, the investments has really picked up significantly. And one of the areas that the investments we're looking at is in the locomotives part of it. And significant investments has gone to upgrade the whole locomotive, the wagon, and everything. And we've also seen the kind of purchase which is expected to happen in the next 3 years. And the government of India has partnered in putting up those factories as well. So I would like to now get Mr. Ajay Mani on to kind of talk about what are the technology parts of it which is there. What does this mean in the overall transport for the rail part of it? How will the user experience enhance? What is the kind of, let's say, congestion that it can remove? So on and so forth in terms of the value that the Indian Railways is going to get by this investments in the technology upgradation. Over to you, Mr. Mani.
Thank you, Mr. Jagan. Wabtec is very happy and very proud to be associated in the transformation and nation building that the Indian Railways is doing. So we have a project which is a 75% Wabtec and 25% of the government of India, which makes the state-of-the-art modern locomotives for the DFCA project. What we are seeing here is that the locomotives, the modernization of locomotives is absolutely important to increase the speed of the freight and increase the share of the freight earnings. And we are also seeing that the production of the passenger locomotives is coming down, and that is essentially going to get replaced by the state-of-the-art Trance Trains at 18, which is a distributed self-propelled coaches. So the shift that we are seeing is in the direction of freight locomotives, and Wabtec, with all the modern technologies, we are future ready with all types of battery operated locomotives. And our strategy is to dovetail with the government of India's initiative, which is to decarbonize the transportation sector, decarbonize the rail. And with the increase in the electric locomotive production, we are also introducing new products in the area of high reach pantographs, which is necessary in the dedicated freight corridor lane. It is a double stack container. So Wabtec is uniquely positioned, and we are to deliver this growth plans of the Indian Railways, and with several new technologies in the area of locomotives and modern technology. I think we are extremely happy to contribute. You're on mute, Jagan.
Yeah, sorry. It's quite relevant because in the geopolitical concentrations that we are, however, we want to be self-reliant, will be adding to the way that we can move ahead. So I think these investments will add a lot of technology transfer to the Indian Railways, and mind you, Indian Railways is also 100 years plus kind of operations, so they have a rich understanding of the railway sector as well, and I'm sure all of this will only add to their learning, and we will be able to do a far better job on hand. Moving on to the freight part of it, we talked about it. Shailesh ji also mentioned in the initial on the dedicated freight corridor. I'll just give a 1-minute context and then invite Mr. Bhatnagar to kind of elaborate and talk it more. If you see both on the road and the rail, the golden quadrilateral, which is the Mumbai, Chennai, Kolkata, and the Delhi part, moves a significant amount of cargo, means that the contribution in the rail part of it is about 16% of the track, but they contribute about more than 60% plus in terms of the freight movement. And similar is the case probably on the road side. Even on the passenger side, I wouldn't be surprised that these are your kind of trunk routes, so to say. So the augmentation of these corridors is extremely important. I also talked about initially the kind of CAGR growth which has happened in both on the passenger and the freight, but the track length has not coped with it. So this needed a fresh new thinking, which would needed a significant amount of investments. It didn't need a patchwork, so all of this wouldn't have worked. And that's where the whole idea of DFCCIL came in and said that we would be putting in new tracks, state of the art, specific for freight. And as Mr. Shailesh also mentioned, that once the freight part of it gets shifted, then the capacity for the passenger opens up, and hence better service delivery can be there. So all of this is being done by DFCCIL. So I'll stop here, hand it over to Mr. Bhatnagar to kind of talk about what is the kind of investments which is being made, what are the kind of opportunities which are there, and also what's the progress which is there. And probably we can come back with a follow-up question to kind of talk about what are the future plans over and above what is already done. Over to you, Mr. Bhatnagar.
Thank you. Yeah. Basically, at present, DFCCIL is engaged in construction of the two dedicated freight corridors. One is the eastern one, and the other is the western one. Now, the western one is about 1,500 kilometers long. That is from JNPT to Dadri. And the eastern dedicated freight corridor, that is from Dankuni near Kolkata to Sahnewal near Ludhiana. So that is about 1,860 kilometers. But yes, out of this 3,300 kilometers, approximately 1,000 kilometers have been commissioned where we are running trains. So that is between Rewari and Palanpur on the western dedicated corridor. This is about 650 kilometers. And on the eastern corridor between Bhaupur and Khurja, so that is about 150 kilometers. So this is about approximately 1,000 kilometers which have been commissioned, and rest would happen in phases, some by March 22, some by June 22, and we hope that both of these would be ready somewhere in the by the end of the year. That's what we expect, at least the western one. Eastern one, yes, there are some issues with regards to the financing part of it. The end portions, from Sonnagar to Dankuni, so those are still being resolved. But the future ones, yes, there are 3 more which are planned, and they are in the DPR stage. That is, the alignments are being decided. The project report is being prepared. So these are 3. That is one from say Bhusawal to Dankuni. That is being called as the East-West corridor. Then we have from Vijayawada to Kharagpur, that where it would join the East-West corridor, and this is being called as the East Coast corridor. And the third one is Itarsi to Vijayawada, so that is being called as the North-South one. So these 3 more are planned. Furthermore, may be taken up later on. But when we have all these, it will be kind of ring fencing. Now, in this, another important component would come in, that is the Konkan Railway. So even Konkan Railway doubling is planned. So this would kind of ring fence, the entire coastal belt, connectivity to all the ports, and then to the hinterland via these east and west corridors. So that is what is being planned for the freight part of it. But yes, this is going to take some time. And now on these commission portions, I would like to talk about the investments that are being done, the terminals which are being set up. Now, we had come up with an RFP for allotting these stations for exclusive use of the bidders, and that way about 14 terminals were given out, where it is 3 years for construction and 5 years for exclusive use. no other party would be permitted to set up a terminal there at these stations. So that way, about 14 terminals are in the construction stage. They are being, the first one is expected to come up this year out of the 14. Now, apart from that, we have declared about 27 stations as good sheds. For this also, we would be inviting we would be floating in an RFP. So this would have again private participation, where the bidder would have 1 year term to set up the infrastructure at these good sheds, and then the terminal charge which the railway collects, that would be shared with the person who is developing it. And apart from that, I would like to just talk about some of those extra features or the salient features which the DFC has come up with. Of course, Western DFC is more fine-tuned for the double stack container movement. So there the height of the OHG has been kept as 7.1 meters, while on the Eastern freight corridor it is 5.1 meters. So that is for the single stack only, but primarily for the coal traffic going towards the thermal powerhouses of the western side of the Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, and Rajasthan. So the Eastern corridor is primarily tuned for the coal movement, while the Western one is for the container movement and double stack. But apart from that, we would like to move even longer trains. So we have loop lines of 1500 meters in comparison to 686 meters that exists on the Indian Railways. Then the train load, if we talk about, at present on the Indian Railway network, we move trains which are up to say 5,400 tons. But on the DFCs, this can go up to about 13,000 tons. So it's longer trains, heavier trains, higher trains. That's what is being planned on the DFC. So we would definitely be moving a significant volume on these dedicated freight corridors. And the concession agreement that DFCCIL has with Ministry of Railways, in that 70% of the freight traffic is supposed to be transferred to DFCCIL. But what we have seen so far, this percentage can go up to even 90 or even 95% on some days. It has happened, especially on the Rewari-Palanpur section, where there is container traffic. So that way, the benefits have already started accruing to the, I would say, the industry as well as the Indian Railways in terms of speeds. Indian Railway has been averaging somewhere around 20 to 23 kilometers per hour, average speed of the goods train. But what we are achieving now on the Western DFC is about 62 to 63 kilometers per hour, which is almost impossible for the trucks to achieve on even the better highways that we have at present. And we have started another service called TOT, we call it, that is trucks on train. It is similar to what we used to call as RoRo, roll on, roll off on the Konkan Railway. So in this, again, this is being operated between Rewari and Palanpur, and 650 kilometers is getting covered in about 10 to 10 and a half hours. So this is a huge saving, which the trucks used to take almost 24 hours earlier. Now it's just about 10 to 10 and a half hours. So it's very popular, and this is what feedback we are getting, that yes, as and when the further DFCs get commissioned, this is one new kind of traffic which would definitely start plying on the railways. Earlier, because of the capacity constraint, the RoRo kind of service was introduced only on the Konkan Railway and not elsewhere. But yes, now this is something which would happen. So this was from my side.
Excellent. I think some of the data points that you talked about in terms of the saving, in terms of time, cost, once it percolates across all the corridors, I'm sure the whole intention of bringing down the logistics cost would really bear fruit. And I think some of the projects, even today I saw a terminal getting commissioned as part of the Gati Shakti part of it. I'm sure many such terminals will get operationalized as we go forward. Mr. Pathak, coming back to you, in moving from the whole passenger and from the freight to the passenger part of it, and then specifically you kind of touched upon the mass transportation, and we are now talking about mobility as a service. In fact, that's the kind of way in which the whole space on the passenger side is moving. So, what are the so metro is what we have talked about. Monorail, in a way, it came in, but may really not take up significant traction other than what's happened in Mumbai. Metro obviously has spanned across multiple cities in the country. What do you think is the future got to store in terms of the overall urban transport on the passenger part of it? What are the kind of innovations which is there? Just to kind of set context there, the metro has always had this argument is, are we getting the bang for the buck, right? In terms of the investment that's being put across, are we able to really, is it worth it? Or can we have other ways in which people can be getting transported, so on and so forth, associated with that part of it. So I want to drop on your experience, because you've been on both sides of the metro. Having done that part of it, I'm sure you would have had some positive and some challenges around that part of it, and then the futuristic part of how things can look at it. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to, with your permission, spend a couple of minutes on the dedicated freight corridor, because there's one link between the dedicated freight corridor and urban public transport, and that is the last mile.
Sure.
So since you mentioned Gati Shakti, yesterday I was on a Gati Shakti webinar with the chairman of one of India's largest port trusts. And we agreed that 90% of his port freight is evacuated using trains. And that's the story of most of the world. I mean, more than 95% of port traffic that comes from international trade is evacuated through train connectivity, not trucks. And I understand that the last connection between JNPT on the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor is going to take some time, which is actually denying the efficiency gains that the DFC is going to, huge efficiency gains it's going to bring to us. So I wish Mr. Bhattagar and his colleagues at DFC all the best. And perhaps there is where Gati Shakti can make a difference. So as we know, Gati Shakti is this coordinated approach between 16 ministries on project design and project construction, where typically people who were in silos earlier get to see each other's perspective and get to talk to each other online. And a lot of the approval business from various departments can be handled on the BISAG and platform of Gati Shakti. The same problem actually is affecting to a certain extent the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail. Because on the Gujarat side, most of the construction has started. But on the Maharashtra side, and particularly in the BKC terminal, construction has not started because of last mile issues. How does this relate to urban public transport? Now, all the people on this webinar, effectively, when you start by walking to the nearest place that your vehicle is parked or the nearest public transit aspect. And then you get into either your personal vehicle or the public transport, and you go on the other side, and then there's another last mile on the other side. So in India, in metro systems, unfortunately, the seamless last mile connectivity is a huge issue even today. Even in a place where the metro has been around for more than 20 years in DMRC, in Delhi Metro, the last mile connectivity for DMRC is not as good as, let us say, a Seoul in Korea, or a Tokyo, or a London, where public transport is the default mode, and people would use cars only in the last resort. So just to share a story, a diplomat from one of the European countries I had met in Brussels was then posted in India, in Delhi. And I asked Brian, what was the big difference between his lifestyle in Brussels and London and Delhi? He said that I used to walk everywhere in London and Brussels, and I used to be fit. Here in Delhi, I only walk to my car, and I'm putting on weight. And this actually has an impact on urban public health. So the way we design urban public transit is also about, encouraging the use of public transit and discouraging the use of private vehicles. So with that preface, let me just come to the urban public transit scenario. And we're talking specifically on rail transport. By rail transport, I would suggest guided transport. Unlike a personal car which can turn right or left, but even a tram is guided transport, right? Now, in the metro systems, we've had commendable success in rolling out kilometers of metros. Uh, Delhi, of course, took the lead, and now so many other cities are building metro systems. That last mile connectivity of metro systems was supposed to be part of the project. Unfortunately, it is not working out in practice. And especially if you're, let's say, a 25-year-old girl, when you get down from a metro station, you would expect a more, safe environment to get into the next leg of your transit, and that is not available today, unfortunately. Metro systems are being developed. They are high cost, as you said. The other problem with metro systems in urban areas is that most cities have a downtown where everyone goes to work in the morning and everyone comes out in the evening. And typically, if you have a six coach metro or an 8-coach metro, you cannot vary the size of the metro coming out of downtown in the evening and going into downtown in the morning. So there is one particular disruptive change technology that I have been tracking for some time. In fact, our teams had visited the California NASA Space Center to see the prototype. And the other reason why I'm hopeful that it will be implemented soon is that one of India's largest companies has now got a 54% stake in this company. And it's called SKYTRAN, Skytran, which is about 2-seater or 4-seater, effectively, as big as a small car, which can cover anywhere to anywhere in Mumbai in less than 30 minutes, which can cover anywhere in Delhi NCR to anywhere in less than 30 minutes. And this is, I would say, the moment it is implemented, it goes point to point without stopping anywhere. It's an air-conditioned cabin, and you can do whatever you want while this car is going to the place that you want. And you can actually put a framework and a grid. So there are, at least 15 different ways of getting from point A to point B, and the control and command center determines the route. Suddenly, all the heavy lifting will be done by a rail, Indian Rail. And all the light lifting will be done by things like Skytran. So I'm just waiting for it to be implemented in one demonstrable project. And the two projects that I can immediately conceive right now is that the fundamental problem on our India border with our northern neighbor is that we have to trek up 7 days and they can drive a bus. And Skytran overcomes that problem. So if, let us say, ITBP or the Indian Army were to commission a test track of Skytran on the border of Nepal, suddenly the logistics disadvantage would get neutralized. The second marquee project could be actually Dehradun to Mussoorie. If you can get from Dehradun to Mussoorie, and a lot of us have done it, in about 5 to 10 minutes, instead of driving around for 1 hour, suddenly all the cities would line up behind Skytran to implement it. Which is why I said that in another 10 years, we might be, and of course it runs on magnetic levitation, much more power efficiency, much lower cost. So we might be seeing how the metros will no longer be used for ordinary transit. It will only be used for heavy occasion of transport. So that's where I wanted to, but in the end, we have to discourage private cars. It does not matter whether the car is a petrol car or a diesel car or an electric car. A car by definition clogs traffic space. So the National Urban Transit Policy in India says move people, not vehicles. And I hope to see that cars are taxed disproportionately so that public transport is incentivized. Thank you.
No, I think very elaborately put, cutting across not only the metro part of it, metro by any means the location of the metros, and how they can do it, spanning into sensitive aspects, how even this can be addressed. I think that's a very insightful part I learned. And also in terms of the tourist. So I think from a revenue generation part of it and how you can get the tourists also on board, I'm sure there's a lot of interest among people to even the gondola part of it attracts so much of audience. Similar to that, this can also then attract audience to experience going from one place to the other. So all of that, very, very hopeful that we would be able to get this going. I want to kind of get in, Mr. Mani, on two aspects. One is the technology part, which will be there. Also on the urban transport, are there specific areas under which you are working with WebTech, right? And what are the new things that you could look at that the general public can experience on the urban transport? You want to take that on, Mr. Mani?
Sure. Building on what Mr. Pathak explained on the urban metro, I just wanted to provide some insights on how we are seeing this. At this point of time, the operational routes is about 740 kilometers in about 8 or 9 metros. Under construction is about 500 kilometers, and proposed routes for the next 3 years is about 1,000 kilometers. Which means that whatever has been built in the last 10 years, and including Delhi Metro has been one of the largest routes, that much is going to get built in the next 3 years. And just to give a perspective, where we see in the next 3 years is that from right now 2022 until 2024, we see Delhi Metro, the extensions, Chennai Metro, Bhopal Indore, Mumbai, again Chennai Metro, Bangalore Metro, Ahmedabad, and then Mumbai Metro Line 4, then Patna Metro, Greater Noida, and then Kolkata Metro, Hyderabad Airport Express. We are seeing a lot of traction. Over 3,000 cars is being proposed by the Ministry of Urban Development and other state governments in the next 3 years. So that is one aspect, and we believe that metros is the best way to decarbonize the planet. So I think if we see any other way of mode of transportation, whether it's automobiles, bus, or two-wheelers, they add to the carbon emission, and that's not so much in the case of the metros. And decongestion of the cities, as like what Mr. Pathak shared a few minutes back. One more point on the urban transport is also what we see as the regional rapid transit system, which is Delhi being the hub, and urban rapid transit system connecting to Haryana, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh. So about 6 phases and over 300 kilometers, Delhi being the hub. This will also decongest the Delhi NCR route and also connect the cities, the remaining nearby cities in the 3 states. I think these RRTS is a very transformational project from our perspective, and I think more of that would be a game changer in the coming years. So I think the Indian Railways has started the right initiatives, the right direction, and this is something that I wanted to add on the urban transport. Now, from a technology perspective, we are extremely proud to be associated with the metros and also with the Indian Railways, because WebTech has both innovation and technology as its DNA. Being the founding fathers of this WebTech enterprise, where Fevili, the inventor of pantographs and entrepreneur of Fevili Transport, Thomas Alva Edison, again the inventor of electric bulbs and also the founder of General Electric, and Westinghouse, the inventor and founder of WebTech. So these three, on technology and innovation, entrepreneurship runs in the DNA of the organization. And what we see here is in terms of the modern brake systems in the metros. Second topic is we have products such as natural refrigerants. One of the important topics in a metro is the consumption of power. And when we have very modern hatchbacks, they consume less power. Hatchback is one of the power consuming products in the metro cars, and natural refrigerants help in reducing the consumption of HVAC. And then, of course, we have several smart tools such as I would say condition-based monitoring of the equipments. These are all emerging technologies. So there's absolutely no need for a metro to do time-based maintenance, but do condition-based maintenance, because the technology allows the train manufacturers and the metro operators to do some data analytics and see what is the consumption of the products, how the products are performing, and then take up such condition-based maintenance. So these are the areas in which Wabtec is very strongly present in its footprint in Hosur and Baddi. And we are very happy to associate with all the metros, car builders, and also the metro operators all over India. Jagan.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Mani. Mr. Pathak, you wanted to add a few points, yeah?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to pose a question to Mr. Bhatnagar also. You know, sometimes in design, urban officials tend to do more for roads than train-based transit. And one example you gave right in the beginning about how road expenditure has been 10 lakh crores, whereas train expenditure has been 5.6. And one example, in fact, relating to the city of Mumbai, is the Mumbai Trance Harbour Link Bridge, which inexplicably does not have a rail connection. And consider that Mumbai is an island. And it's almost like, you know, the Paddington Express from Heathrow Airport. You board it and you get off at Paddington, and then you get other public transit. We could have actually had the Mumbai Trans Harbour Link as a rail-only bridge. Otherwise, in one island, you're suddenly getting 15,000 cars more. Already the Mumbai traffic is great and so impressive, and you're getting 15,000 more cars. So sometimes when we design and conceive of projects, we need to see why we are not opting for rail-based transit. Thank you.
No, excellent point, and with greater focus in terms of green and movement through green part of it, this makes a lot more. It ticks off all the boxes, and hence neat part of it. If the panelists want to comment about it, I'll just pause here. If any one of you want to comment on it, happy to take that. Else we can, yeah.
I think just make a short point. I mean that I think the results that we get by investing in the roads, I mean it's a lesser investment which gives you the better throughput in the short term. Also, of course, so that's the kind of I think that is what has led to the situation in Bombay, where I mean it was conceived without the railway link in that bridge. So I think, but it's a gestation period is much longer. The construction period is much longer in case of railway projects, and that's the reason why we have seen these kind of things happening. That yes, I mean if you have to decongest, build the road infrastructure quickly so that it gets decongested, rather than waiting for a longer gestation period. So that's probably
I would tend to agree there. There are a couple of other projects which are, let's say, from VT to an elevated corridor and things like that, which we've been hearing for quite some time, and it's still not taken off. But I think from an investment to the returns perspective, somewhere the road and the last mile connectivity also is easily achievable in the roads part of it, but not taking the merit of what Mr. Pathak mentioned. There's a lot more merit if you were to look at it from a medium to a longer term, what a rail can achieve. Surely that stands there. Sir, coming back to Mr. Bhatnagar out here in terms of the partnerships, right? I think a project of this nature with the freight corridor running into few 10,000 crore part of it. What are the kind of it could be the general public-private partnership which will be there, but also in terms of the overall maintenance part of it, the operations aspect, where opportunities could be there. So what I'm saying is that just not the capital-intensive nature of the where the opportunities are. Over and above that, there could be a lot of other opportunities which would be there at the whole track part of it, the maintenance. Then you have the terminals part of it, which will be there. And you also kind of talked about some of the ones on the multimodal logistics part of it, where you can get the other modes of transport participate, and hence the overall experience will be there. And going forward, also have not a single user plying on the tracks. You can have a multi-user environment as well. So I think these are some of the things that we've been hearing. If you could just throw light on that, and how that then brings the whole ecosystem and the nation building happens there. I'd be happy to hear from that.
Yes, sir. So at present, as per the concession agreement, at present, Indian Railways is the sole operator. That is, we are using the Indian Railways rolling stock, the crew. It's all from Indian Railways. But in future, yes, a multi-user or the multi-operator regime is also thought of. I mean, it is there in the plans. But yes, when the private operators would also be allowed to run trains. But at present, there are 16 container train operators who have signed concession agreements with the Indian Railways. So their trains, they hand over to the Indian Railways, not to DFCCIL. And Indian Railway hands over to DFCCIL. And the DFC gets a track access charge that is paid for by the Indian Railways. So at present, we are interacting only with the Indian Railways, not with the private train operators as such. But yes, in the future, there would be a multi-operator regime. Now, coming to the private participation as far as terminals are concerned. Now, that's where there is a huge scope. Like I said, there have been about 14 terminals which are being set up. And this was on the bidding process. I mean, RFP was brought out last year, and these 14 are under construction. Now, Indian Railways also come up with the Gati Shakti terminal policy. Now, that is what is going to be adopted on the DFCCIL also. So this gives an opportunity to the private sector to participate in the development of the smaller terminals, I mean the good sheds or CRTs, what we call container rail terminals. Apart from that, dedicated freight corridor has also earmarked 3 locations, that is Kanpur, Rewari and Sanand, where we are offering the land, building up a terminal on the DFCCIL land on the build, operate, transfer model. So this will also be coming up in the future. Apart from that, now what we are targeting is the cargo aggregation. Now we are in the process. I mean, this would be a software-based kind of initiative where we would be picking up the parcels also on the DFCCIL network, and there would be aggregators who would be involved. That they would deal something like what the Amazon or Flipkart are doing. That they would pick up from the customer's place, bring it to the station, book it on the railways, and again the last mile delivery at the other end. So this is being done, may come up very soon, and we are going to involve the Indian Postal Department also in this because of their reach in the rural areas. So this is another initiative which DFCCIL is pursuing. Of course, there is still some time before we are able to launch this, but yes, now here there would be immense opportunities. All these aggregators, I mean, these would be private people, the people involved in the last mile delivery or the collection of these parcels. So that gives huge scope for the employment part as well as the private participation. So these are some of the areas where the FCCIL is moving ahead.
Sure. I'll pose a question to Mr. Pathak or get his views. Sir, you've been a proponent on the whole asset monetization part, right? And I remember at least for the last 5 years, if not more, I'm sure you would be doing that a bit more as well, where you've actively kind of said that, the whole cuckoo to the butterfly part of it. What are the kind of things that can be done in the medium term in the railways as well, right? So the kind of investments which has been put across out here from the roads, just from an audience perspective, roads has effectively done this. We saw in the papers today also, I think the revenue secretary talking about 70,000 crore, which has got mopped on the asset monetization, specifically on the road sector. And he has also kind of alluded to saying that railways is a bit behind as far as this is concerned, and hope that this will get picked up going forward. So is that an innovation which can happen, so to say, in the financial part of it, in the railways as well? Will that be beneficial? Will it be national building? Is that something that we should push quite aggressively? Multiple questions. Feel free to pick one or two and kind of deliberate on that. Your views.
So the first thing I'd like to say is that I'm very happy that the government has started listening to people like us. And asset monetization is something that we have been advocating for the last 10 years, if not more. And I'm happy to see the 17,000 is actually the 3 TOT bundles of NHAI plus the InvIT.
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of people who are connected with the railways, and therefore I would like to make a statement that they may not like, which is that in the national monetization pipeline, when it was announced, we had taken a view that 17,000 crores coming from the railways in this financial year is not going to happen. And there are various reasons for it. One is our experience with the railway station redevelopment projects. I remember bidding for the New Delhi railway station project in 2007. And after that, I got to know how the railways top brass thought about it. And I told my team to pull out because there's no point in wasting time. Even in the 2014 onwards era, we have heard so much about railway station redevelopment, but the proof is, actions speak louder than words. So finally, I suggested that maybe the railway should do the caterpillar to butterfly, complete the project, and once the risk of construction is taken out, then offer it to long-term investors. The second example was the passenger train operations. And we were one of the companies that were pre-qualified for the passenger train opportunity bid. But it is not the lack of a rail regulator that people think bids did not come. The primary reason was that we were not allowed the same facilities as the railways. And we know that the railways leases its rolling stock from the IRFC, the Indian Railways Finance Company. And we said, if we invest 5,000 crores in rolling stock and 3 years down the line, the concession is terminated, what are we going to do with this 5,000 crores? So please give us the same level playing field that we should be able to lease rolling stock from IRFC. And when that did not come, we did not bid. And, there are, I can go and talk about the Sonnagar Dankuni example. The Sonnagar Dankuni is being sought to be done by PPP, but most of the people who are interested in it want it for the construction. So, we had a webinar day before yesterday on asset monetization. And I said 2 things that the railways and the government of India should look at for immediate monetization is the Delhi Metro Rail Corporation. And DMRC has a rolling, one of the largest networks in the world. But it is not managed as efficiently, let us say, as it would be by a private entity because of incentive compatibility. So why can't we do a private participation of infrastructure? I'm hesitating to use the word PPP on monetizing Delhi Metro. Similarly, you mentioned the elevated rail corridor of the Mumbai suburban. I suggested, and the Honorable Finance Minister is also listening, that the Mumbai suburban, the local train system, as it is operating, should be offered on a PPP for private investment. And the elevated corridor should be taken up as a construction project by the railways. Suddenly, because of air rights over Bandra and Andheri and Bombay Central, so many private entrepreneurs will monetize so much more in the Mumbai suburban and manage things efficiently, which is not happening currently. But with all due respect, the railways is a monolith organization in India. We have seen it when the rest of India shut down in the COVID lockdown. Railways kept going. And that is why the railways is a unique industry for monetization. Thank you.
Yeah, true. The wheels didn't stop when the rest of the country were grappling with their own set of issues. Kudos to Indian Railways to have contributed so significantly on that. So moving on, Mr. Mani, I just want to come back to you on in terms of the technology adoption part of it. So what are the kinds of the absorption also on the technology part? How effectively is that happening? And what are the issues, challenges, and the positives that you've seen in this context? You want to kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you. What we are seeing in the last few years has been one of the most progressive. One second. One of the most progressive way of working of the Indian Railways. See, for example, the last technology transfer on the passenger coaches happened in 1999 to 2001, which is a Link-Hoffman-Bush. That's the transfer of technology that happened between Alstom, ABB to Indian Railways. And after that, in 20 years, nearly 2 decades later, we had the train sets being as a new platform. So there's been one of the most progressive and most transformative adoption of technology. And private sector has immensely contributed to this initiative also. So what we are seeing is that the Railways is listening to many of the players. In Wabtec, we have one of the largest centers of technology outside of the US in Bangalore. There are over 1,000 technologists work on different cutting-edge technologies in the area of communication, in the area of 3D printing, and also on remote monitoring and diagnostics. From Wabtec, what we are seeing is that real examples, good examples could be on the high-reach pantograph, right? So this is the dedicated freight corridor. We are seeing that this is a very new product, and we are working along with the RDSO to get the right kind of specifications, right kind of, there should not be any downtime. Every time there's a downtime, then we have a diesel locomotive to come and pull the entire formation. So this is one area that we are working on. We are also having other initiatives like the jerk-free couplers. So normally, if you are in the passenger train, in the LHB coach or Shatabdi Rajdhani, you see some sudden jerks. And this is one area that has been bothering the RDSO and the railways. And this is another area that where we are actively working with the government, the formation of specifications. And when we are working with the railways, we don't want to introduce any proprietary technology. It must be a technology that is available for everybody to come and participate. The third one initiative is on the smoke detection, because when we have a lot of trains which are non-air conditioned, okay, and when there is a fire, it's very difficult to find out whether there is a fire or not. And we are working with the railways to get the right kind of specification for fire detection. So what we are seeing from a perspective of the railways is that an excellent openness to absorb and look at new technologies. So that is very, very good. And we're very hopeful that like Wabtec, several other organizations in the private space will also contribute. And a recent announcement by the Honorable Railway Minister that the more and more R&D will come from the private sector. This is, it's very good, because at this point of time, 100% of the R&D is coming from the railways. Now, a few days back, he mentioned that 90% of such R&D will come from the private sector. So this is going to be very transformative once again, because we'll be able to bring the best technologies from Europe and US. It is compatible, of course, with the Indian conditions. So this is an area that we are looking forward to with the railways also.
Yeah, great. Excellent. I think we the fag end of the part. Mr. Pathak, closing remarks and any additional points that you would want to make, I'll be happy to.
You know, since Canada is a sponsor, I would like to urge everyone to understand how the Union Station in Toronto and the subway is connected seamlessly with its pedestrian walking infrastructure, and how it's connected to the YYZ, the international airport. So that's a good model. My last point was, you know, there are a lot of people from the railways and from the public sector. and they might be slightly apprehensive about what this asset monetization is and what the government's plans on privatization are, because there are 4 strategic sectors. Every other sector, the PSU will either be disinvested or closed. And my strong request to them would be to think of what happened in telecom. In telecom, when private investors came in telecom, invariably the top talent from the telecom department and the government migrated to the private sector. So I'm just suggesting that lateral entry works both ways. If lateral entry can happen into government, a lot of lateral entries will happen from the railways and from the PSUs to the private sector. So the future is bright.
Yeah, a good bite to put across for people to think about. Yes, but that's talent as well, right? So today, talent has no boundaries. It does transcend and moves across. Not only probably in India, people would be looking at moving outside of India as well. So I don't think that's any more a limitation. People do want to look at challenges. Very fair point, sir. In closing remarks, Mr. Bhatnagar?
I would just like to add that yes, the FCCIL is also looking for a modal shift and contributing to what the National Rail Plan is aiming at. That is about 45% of the traffic on railways by the end of 2030. So that's where we do have a consultancy funded by World Bank that is under the process of finalization. So that's where we hope we would be able to contribute. And as soon as the other corridors get commissioned, or these corridors are also commissioned fully, that's where the modal shift would start happening. The Indian Railways has already started reaping the benefits of the decongestion effect that we can already see in the Rewari Palanpur section, the Kanpur Khurja section. So that's where the benefits would start coming in, and they are already being felt in the relevant areas where these portions have been commissioned. So that I think the future is quite bright, and as the DFCs get commissioned, we would, even the public or in general, we would see the effect. Thank you.
No, more certainly, I'm very hopeful that it's transformational project. It's a demonstrative project. Once it's up and running, I think the ability, see, it also adds to me the phase that the ability to take on larger projects. It gives that confidence. It gives that momentum saying that, yes, we have done this, now we can do a bit more and a lot more. It gives that level of confidence to people and showcases India in a different context worldwide. So we are all behind the FCC to have this happen. Mr. Mani, any closing remarks?
So from a private sector perspective, I think the National Rail Plan is one of the well-articulated document. Okay, it tells very clearly what's the intention of the government, what are its focus areas, the freight earnings, the priority, and we see a great amount of consistency in what is documented and what is being executed. So from a perspective of a say-do ratio, I think we are seeing that the government, that ministry, is very serious about transforming the railways. And we also have a very clear blueprint for the urban mobility also. So I think it gives the National Rail Plan gives a lot of clarity for private sector to make necessary investments and make in India policy. So all those things are extremely dovetailing. So for first time, we are seeing a good level of consistency in several policies, whether it's a Make in India, DPIIT, the local content requirements. So several things are very consistent, and we are able to make good investments in this country. Of course, technology is also growing, and the new announcement of having more, R&D from the private sector will also be a game changer. So from our perspective, I think the topic, which is in New India at 75, I think is very appropriate, and we should even see for the next 25 years. So that is the thing, because the railways is a very long gestation product. Whatever we do today has to live for at least 30 to 40 years. So when we do something now, we should see India at 100. So that is my closing comment, Mr. Jagan.
No, excellent. Thank you very much. I think just to wrap up, we discussed technology, we discussed investment, we talked about asset monetization, futuristic way of movement, tourism, the Gati Shakti master plan part of it, the whole cargo, the freight, the passenger. I think it's quite an wholesome discussion. Very great points brought out by the panelists. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Nija ma'am to do the concluding part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, a very engaging session. I was a bit apprehensive with one speaker dropping out. How would we? But excellent input from our co-chair, Mr. Shailesh Pathak, our esteemed panelists, Mr. Shobhit Bhatnagar and Mr. Ajay Mani, and of course, the weaving of the story. Excellent moderation by Jagan for creating a very well articulated storyboard to bring out the best from our speakers. I'm very confident that the delegates have benefited by this interaction. And with this, I thank all of you once again. And we immediately move on to our next session, Urban Rail and Metro. Thank you once again. And I request the audience to please be tuned immediately after this session. We start our next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.